Hey, you're keeping company with Connor on 92.7, 96.9 WRRV, the Hudson Valley's alternative, and we got a great guest today. In line with Student Press Freedom Day, we have Pratika, a Student Press Law Center board member, with us today to talk about student press, student freedom, and censorship. Because one thing's for sure, there's a lot of censorship out there when it comes to all different kinds of media. There's so much bias out there. What can you trust? And when censorship is instilled at a very early level, it's only going to get worse. So I'm glad that we have people like Pratika who are fighting to make sure that the truth really gets out there. So Pratika, hi there. How are you? Thank you for being here with me today.
Hi, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So as we said already, you're a board member on the Student Press Law Center. So can you tell us how you got affiliated with them in the first place?
Yes, so when I was in high school, I began working with the Student Press Law Center on a lot of advocacy and grassroots organizing around student press freedom. And it started in my home state of Virginia when I was a high school student journalist. And it just continued into college. As I continued my student journalism journey, I started to work on other efforts more around the country. And I was so passionate about the work that the Student Press Law Center did that when they asked me to be on their board, I was thrilled to serve as their kind of youth member, their young voice, to talk about these issues on a broader scale.
That's terrific. And honestly, to be able to have somebody that's in the trenches doing all that, it's very important to have that perspective. So outside of working with the Student Press Law Center, what's your background in journalism that helped lead you into this position? And what have been your inspirations when it comes to press and journalism?
So I started in high school with journalism. I was editor-in-chief of my high school paper back home in Virginia, and now I'm a student at Northeastern University in Boston, and I continue to do freelance journalism work. So I cover issues important to Gen Z, to young people, mostly focused on politics and technology. That background in student journalism also has translated into a lot of research work that I do on technology and the future of media and law. So I do a lot of different things. My inspirations are mainly focused on, they stem from the fact that students fill in local news gaps. I'm really inspired by young people. As a young activist myself and as a young journalist, I think that the work that we do is instrumental. I mean, across the country, student journalists are state house reporters. They're covering protests. They're the ones breaking news on shootings on campus. So that's really what's been inspiring me to fight for student press freedom, is that the campus papers and the student journalists on the ground doing this reporting are serving as these outlets for the surrounding community, and they deserve to be able to do their job without any consequences.
I agree with you 100%. I worked in the administrative offices of my college. I worked strongly with the student newspaper there as well. And the kind of things that I saw when it came to how the administration would want to blow things over or try to sugarcoat something or try to make something, just disappear, it was really insulting and really sad to see. And that definitely made things very difficult. So the fact that you're going out there as an activist, as a journalist yourself, and making that happen and supporting other people, that is huge. So when it comes to the kind of censorship that Student Press Freedom Day is fighting against, what have you personally seen be censored in your journalism and the journalism around you?
I've seen a lot of different cases, but starting with myself, one of the things I think a lot about is this issue of self-censorship, which means you refrain from publishing stories because of potential backlash. So it's not outright censorship from administration, but it's censoring what you want to write about because you think that administration or professors or whoever will give you issues after you publish it. So that started when I was in high school. There was some really small issues sometimes that people I would work with on my staff or that I would write about that I didn't want to publish. So things like dress code. I was writing a story about vaping at my high school and then ended up not publishing it just because people would refuse to speak to me out of fear of consequences. So there was a lot of limitations that I saw in high schools. And when I started working more with the Student Press Law Center as a board member, I would work with students across the country, and I see these cases of outright censorship now very rampant in states like Florida, Texas, Nebraska, especially over content that students want to publish related to like the LGBTQ community or politics, really, really crucial, instrumental topics that students are unable to write about because the administrators now ban these stories from being published.
So with that, then, what kind of effect do you think that has on the population as a whole, just as a culture here among these campuses, among these schools, among just people in general? What does that censorship say about those topics and how we are being told to respond to them?
It's such a blatant free speech issue, and it really stems down to silencing the next generation of voices. We're teaching kids that it's okay to not tell the truth, to not have the truth out there, because that's what this censorship is. It's preventing these really factual, well-reported stories from going out there. So a lot of it is just teaching the next generation of voices that it's okay to back down and not tell the truth. And I think that's really sad, and it's a really big free speech issue going on, not just with student press, but with students across the country when it comes to books, the freedom to read, the freedom to write. And it's really, really sad.
It is definitely really sad to see, and it definitely makes things harder to progress in that way. You mentioned banned books for a second, and one thing that I want to bring up that kind of ties to this, there's a college right near us, Bard College, that's having its first Eleanor Roosevelt Banned Books Award ceremony, and they're awarding a bunch of different authors around here for their work and just speaking out against everything. And that's what I really wanted to tie into next, just like how they are having this moment to celebrate speaking out and being resilient. What are you and the Student Press Law Center doing to combat this said censorship?
There is a lot of efforts that the Student Press Law Center works on. We're the only organization that focuses on student press freedom. So a lot of what we're trying to do is on the ground legislative work. So for example, in my home state of Virginia, and also just with students across the country, I worked on New Voices legislation, which hopes to restore and protect First Amendment rights for students so that they can combat censorship and administrators aren't able to censor as easily, and then student media advisors also have those protections. So these pieces of legislation we're working on getting passed in 33 states that don't currently have these laws. So it's definitely a big undertaking, a big grassroots movement that we're working on to combat this censorship. And then I also do just a lot of advocacy on my own around censoring, especially online harassment. So I do a lot of writing around that and research, talking to students about what's important to them right now and what types of censorship issues they're facing. The Student Press Law Center provides a lot of free legal help through our free legal hotline. So students are able to kind of combat their censorship issues and take a stand out to our organization and working with us. But the New Voices laws are definitely the biggest thing that I'm working on. I think it's so important, and it's such a cool movement.
That is a really impressive movement, and I'm glad that's something that you're working on. So when it comes to people being able to support that New Voices legislation, how can somebody who's an inspiring journalist, a journalist, or somebody in the community that just believes in free speech, how might they be able to help and support you guys in this effort?
So students who are passionate about New Voices, there's a lot of statewide groups, such as New Voices Texas, New Voices New York, these coalitions that already exist that you could definitely look up and see who you can get involved, what students you can work with, who's leading that coalition, and also reaching out to the Student Press Law Center's advocacy team. You can just go to splc.org and look at New Voices on our website, and you'll see which state has which movement, their social media accounts with each state. So if you're really passionate in your state and you're like, what can I do? Definitely reach out to these groups. I started because I started the coalition in Virginia, and I've seen students now gather in New York, in Texas, these groups of hundreds and hundreds of kids that work on lobbying legislators. They send letters to lawmakers. They go down to the state house to testify for the bill when the legislative season comes around. So I highly recommend students to try to find out their state groups. And if you're just passionate about student press freedom, maybe you're a professor or a teacher, or you just care about the future of media, you can definitely support the Student Press Law Center. our legal hotline runs completely, and our organization runs completely on grants and donations. So anything you can do to help, and also we're making sure you support student journalism, support student newsrooms, and keep up with what the students around you are publishing and working on.
Totally, and I love that. You mentioned the hotline and you mentioned donations. Where can people find you guys online, and or do you also have the number of the hotline readily available on you?
So you can find us at splc.org or on social media at Student Press Law Center. The hotline you can go to just on our website, so splc.org, super easy to remember. And there's also a lot of other things like pronoun, protest, AI guides, and other pre-publication review resources should you not need a legal hotline but just want to look at other things that the Student Press Law Center offers. splc.org-donate is where you can go to donate if you want to support us.
Fantastic. And of course, all links and information will be in the description of this interview, so you don't have to wander too far. Pratika, thank you so much for all of this. Before we wrap up and everything, we've been talking so much about the landscape of student, college, media, and press, but what are your feelings about the media landscape as a whole today, and how what we learn in an educational setting then later bleeds into the rest of journalism culture?
I have so many thoughts on the media landscape. I think this is a great question. I mean, I think the outlook is, to be frank, really grim at this moment, given that there's local news outlets that are dying, and even the big outlets laying journalists off in mass. And so I think with the rise of TikTok, the TikTokification of news, as I like to call it, and the rise of all this disinformation, now we're introducing AI into the media ecosystem. It just feels so crowded and almost hopeless, but I think that young voices are really the future. I mean, I'm a firm believer in the power of what young activists can do and young journalists. So I think the next generation of journalists who are really being diligently trained, whether in high school or in university, they know how to report, they know facts, they know AP style. They have the power to fill in these gaps and to really revive the media ecosystem if we let them. So I just want to highlight that I think if anyone who cares about democracy wants to help, then believe in student journalism, believe in student voices. I personally do feel sad at times looking at the state of the media landscape because it's something I care about so deeply. But then I remember that there's so many young reporters out there who are really making a difference in their communities. And that adds a little bit of hope back into the picture.
Absolutely, and I think there is plenty of hope out there. I know there are so many things that are kind of going against free speech and all those voices, but as long as there's always somebody shouting out loud the answers and the truth, I think something's going to come into fruition. So that just kind of leads me to say, I know that this entire interview has been really based around it, but as we wrap this up, why is Student Press Freedom Day so important?
Student Press Freedom Day is just the one day out of a year that we really, really focus on our efforts on raising awareness of the issues and showing what student journalists can do and the issues that they're facing right now. We also are able to use Student Press Freedom Day to highlight the work that the Student Press Law Center and our partnering organizations are able to offer to help foster a freer press. So even though we do this work 365 days a year, Student Press Freedom Day is our day to highlight the persistence that student journalists are facing and to really make that call to raise awareness and to take action.
Amazing. And I think that's really great. And again, if you, the person listening, of course, if you are interested in supporting or getting behind anything that's been going on with the Student Press Law Center, we have all of that information in the description of this interview so that you can follow along. You can look up different resources. You can see the amazing work that they're doing. And, of course, you can donate because every little bit helps. Pratika, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your activism, and wishing you the very best when it comes to Student Press Freedom Day and just getting the word out there altogether. So again, thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course.